Entity Framework Core is the most used ORM in .NET, but there are a few things that you need to keep in mind so you don't shoot yourself in the foot. In this video, we're going to cover off some of the most common things I see when people are first starting out with EF Core that they get wrong. Let's jump into it. Tip number one is don't return the entire table. So here we have this method, get all post by author. So all we're trying to do is get all the posts from our database from a particular author. So what's the actual issue here? So our issue is actually right here, this call to toArray. What this is going to do is return the entire post table from our database and then do our filtering in memory using this where clause. So this is what this looks like from a diagram perspective. Our database, we're getting all of our data and we only really care about this row here, right? This highlighted row here. But we're still transferring all this information to our C# application. And then our C# application is just filtering the data and then just discarding this. So as you can see, we're transferring all this extra information that we don't actually need over the network just to be discarded and garbage collected. So this is actually really easy to fix, thankfully. All we need to do is invert our call to toArray and where. So toArray is the very last thing that we actually call. So I'm just going to copy this code and I'm just going to quickly invert these. So it's really important. Any call to toArray, toList, toDictionary, etc. that should be the very last thing that you call, because this line here or anything similar to this is going to actually execute the call on the database side. So we want to perform all of our queries before we do anything like toArray, toList, toDictionary, etc. Reordering those two lines of code is going to make a really big difference. So what we're going to be doing is getting the filtered data from the database. So we're only returning the row that we actually want, and then we're transferring that to the C# application. So the C# application isn't actually doing any filtering and discarding of information, and we're limiting the data that's being sent over the network. So that's going to really boost our performance a lot as well. Tip number two follows on from the idea of only transferring the data that you actually need over the network, which is selecting only the columns that you actually need. So we have this record, which is a post summary. It contains ID, title, and author. And this is just a subset of information from an actual post because it's just a summary, right? So here we have this method, which is just going to get post summaries. So all that we're doing is we're getting our posts, we're including our author information. Then what we're doing is we're actually selecting a subset of information, such as ID, title, author first name, author last name, and then we're just returning that. So very similar to last time, our database is going to be retrieving all this information, but all we really care about is this particular data here. So we're going to be transferring all that information to our C# application, and then our C# application is essentially going to select the properties that we actually need and then just discard the rest. So really what we want to do is only select this data here and send it over the network for C# to deal with. Thankfully, this is really easy to fix using the select method. So all we need to do is database.posts select, and this is going to be a post. And what we're going to be doing is transforming this into a post summary. So let's do that. So we're going to select our post.id, our post.title, and now we need to concatenate our post author first name and last name. So we're going to go post.author.first name plus add a space in there. And then we're also going to get the post.author.last name. Okay, and then we need to return the array, toArray. So what our new updated code is doing, it's actually getting the filtered data from our database. So it's only returning the columns that we actually care about and transferring it to the C# application. And then our C# application is just using it, not having to discard or select any particular columns. It's just getting the data that it needs, and it's just going to continue on from there. Tip number three is avoiding the Cartesian explosion. So here we have this method, which is going to get an author with their posts. And it's very simple code, right? We have database.authors.include the post, where the author ID is this author ID, and we're just getting that single author. So looking at this doesn't look too bad, right? We're doing our includes and we're filtering before we call single or default. So it's going to be executing that on the database side, and it's not going to be returning all the table or all the data from authors, etc. So this looks pretty good, but what's actually wrong with this? Okay, so what this code is doing is we're going to be joining authors and post in one query. So essentially, we're going to have all this duplicated information regarding the author. So each one of these rows is going to contain the exact same information. And then we're going to have post 1, post 2, and post n. So n number of posts. All that information is going to be transferred over the network to our C# application. Then our C# application is going to create the author. It's just going to take one of those rows to populate the author properties, and then it's going to take all those individual posts. So here you can see we have all this author information being duplicated. Now imagine if the author had 100 posts, 1,000 posts, 1,000,000 posts. So this information is going to be duplicated n number of times depending on how many posts the author has. Depending on how large your data set is, this could be a real problem because you're duplicating this information 100, 1,000, 1,000,000 times. Thankfully, this is really easy to fix with one line of code. So I'm just going to copy and paste this code, and all I'm going to add is as split query. So what this is going to do is make two separate queries, one for authors and one for their posts. So with that one small code change, this is what's going to happen. We're going to have two queries now. We're going to have one to get the author information and then one to get their posts. So as you can see, we're only getting one set of data for our author, but we're still getting all of our posts. And then we're transferring that data to our C# application, and then it's building the exact same object. So as you can see, this is transferring a lot less data. If we were to think that the author had 100, 1,000, 1,000,000 posts, we're only transferring one set of author information and then all their posts. So we're not duplicating that author information 100, 1,000, 1,000,000 times, for example. However, I don't want you to think this is a silver bullet. You shouldn't be using this every single time because this does have an overhead. The overhead of creating two queries, and then also the overhead on the C# application to actually stitch those two queries together. So the use of split query is actually very conditional. It should really depend on the size of your data that you're actually going to be returning from your database. If you're only returning one or two rows, it's probably not worth doing as split query. But if you're returning hundreds, thousands, millions, for example, it's probably better to use as split query so you're not duplicating all that information. And tip number 4 is performing efficient bulk updates and deletes. So here we have this method to archive posts by a particular author. So what this code is doing is we're loading all of our posts from our database for a particular author, we're looping through them, and then we're setting archived equal to true. And then we're saving changes in our database. So really, we're loading all this information in to change one property and then saving it. That's not really the most efficient way to do things. We could just be using one SQL statement to do an execute update archived equals true, where author ID is author ID. Thankfully, in EF Core 7, they introduced functionality to do bulk updates and deletes without loading any data. So let me show you. So all we need to do is database.posts. Then we need to filter our post by our author ID. Now, instead of calling toList or toArray, we're actually going to be executing an update. So we're going to use the execute update method. So as you can see, there's multiple methods here. There's execute update and execute delete. So if you're doing a bulk delete, you'd obviously use the execute delete method. So I'm going to use the execute update. And what are we doing? Well, we're going to be setting a property. So I'm just going to format this a little bit different. Set property. And what are we setting a property on? On our post. And we're going to be doing post.archived equals true. So here's our new code, nice and simple. We're doing database.post, we're filtering our post by author ID, then we're executing an update, and we're setting a property on our post, and we're setting the archived equal to true. And we can actually chain this together to update multiple properties in one single call. So all I need to do is set property on our post again, and what we're going to be updating is post.updatedAt, and we're going to be setting that to datetime.utc now. Okay, so here you can see we're now updating the updated at call as well, or the updated at column as well, rather than just the archived. So you can keep chaining these together by a set property. You can update the every single column if you want to. But yeah, this is the example of updating all of our posts without actually loading anything into memory. So that's it. That's the most common things that I see people get wrong when they're first starting out in EF Core. Now, don't get me wrong, this isn't an exhaustive list and there's definitely a lot more things you should consider. So I definitely recommend checking out the documentation on EF Core. It's very well done. It's got all the information that you could ever want. So go and check that out if you want to learn more. Hope you guys enjoyed. See you in the next one.